Hey friend, welcome to another exciting episode. I am so excited to continue the series on how to plan your business from day one so that you can avoid burnout. In today's episode, I am going to talk about the 5 easy steps to launch your online service-based business without overwhelm. If you're ready to dive in, pop in those earbuds, lace those shoes, and let's dive into today's episode. Are you ready to streamline your focus and get clarity to start your online service-based business? Are you tired of struggling with lack of clarity, self-doubt, and the fear of being a public failure? Do you wish you had a clear plan you could follow to make your calling a reality? Hey friend, you don't have to stay stuck any longer. With a renewed mindset and a clear plan, you can start a business that fulfills your calling and makes a profit. I'm your host, Chichi Ukomado, a Christian business coach, Jesus follower, and a 7-figure service-based entrepreneur. In this podcast, I'll teach you how to streamline your focus, get clarity on your business idea, create your business launch plan, set up your business essentials, and launch your sustainable and profitable business from scratch. You will get tons of encouragement, godly wisdom, and accountability to grow in your faith and new business journey. It's time to partner with God and take your first step to start that business. You know the one I'm talking about? Yes, that one you've been putting off for a long time. If you're listening to me right now and you have never left a review for this podcast, I want to ask a favor of you. Please pause me right now and go over to Apple Podcast and leave me a written review for this podcast. If you don't have an iPhone, you can leave a review on whatever podcast app you're using to listen right now. Please pause me right now and go leave me a review. Now, the reason I ask for reviews is because that is the only way I can get feedback from you to know that you are learning, you are being blessed and encouraged by this show. Your feedback means a lot to me. When I read it, it helps me know that I'm not just talking to myself on the mic. I have people that are listening, learning, being encouraged, and getting all the things they need to start their business. So please consider leaving me a review. Pause me right now and go leave me a review. Thank you so much. On the first Sunday in December in 2022, I remember going to church that day and the pastor preached and he said that there's someone here who God has put something in your heart to start before the year ends. And when he said that, I knew immediately that I was the one. I felt like Jonah that day, just sitting in the church and hearing him speak. And I left church that day. I came home and I knew that I had just 4 weeks to launch my podcast before the year ended. So when I was thinking about launching my podcast, I kept asking myself, what is the minimum viable way I can launch this podcast in 4 weeks? And that led me to choosing a launch path, a launch strategy that could help me launch quickly within 4 weeks. And that leads me to the first step that you can take to launch your online service-based business without overwhelm. The first step is choose a launch path that aligns with your current season. For me, I was in a season in my life where I had my e-commerce logistics business that I run 9 to 5. So I knew that I didn't have a lot of time to do so much. And besides, I had just 4 weeks to launch that podcast. So I decided to go with what I call the audience first path. I told myself, I said, okay, since I have a limited time and I need to launch this podcast in 4 weeks, I'm just going to focus on serving my audience with content that can be free coaching to them. And that was how I chose my path to launch my own online service-based business. Now, you want to ask yourself the question, how much time do I have? when do I want to launch this service-based business? Based on that, you can choose a path. Now, in episodes 44, episodes 45, and 46, I talk about the three paths that you can take to start a service-based business. The first one is the audience first, meaning you pick a platform where you want to publish content consistently, either a blog or a podcast or a vlog, and you launch your service-based business by just posting content. That's all you do. That's the audience first path. Then the service first path is where you launch your service. So you put your services together, you create your offer, and you start selling them right away from day one. Then the third path is what I call the whole 9 yards, where you do the audience first. So you're launching a content platform where you're posting content, and you're also launching your service and your offer. So ask yourself, in this current season I am in now, what launch path will work best for me? You might be a Christian career woman who is working a 9-to-5 job, and you know that you have been called to start this online service-based business. If that's you, then you don't have a lot of time at the onset. So you might want to start with the service first path. If you decide to start with the service first path, you might need to start with just a few services so that you do not overwhelm yourself and you do not get burnt out. Then as the business grows and as you make more money, you can now hire more people and expand your services. Once you have chosen a path, you can also determine how much time you need to launch based on the path that you've chosen. For me, when I chose the audience first path, and I knew I wanted to launch my podcast by the 31st of that month. So I had exactly 4 weeks, and I determined that 4 weeks will be enough for me to launch the podcast. So once you choose your path, determine how much time it will take you to launch your business. The second step is to decide on your MVB and set a launch date. What is an MVB? An MVB simply stands for minimum viable business. It simply means what is the minimum viable business solution that you can launch that provides a transformation to your customers, and you don't have to do all the bells and whistles all at once. So your minimum viable business might mean launching your business with only one service first and waiting until you have grown in revenue or you have several customers with that one service and learned from what you have done and improved the service, then you can now add other services. So think about minimum viable. You don't have to launch all your services all at once. You can launch with just one service or maybe two services and focus on delivering those two services excellently. Then you can add more to your service offerings as your business grows. So decide on your MVB, decide on the service that you are going to launch with first. If you are going with the service first path, if you are going with the audience first path, decide on the platform that you're going to use to launch your business and post content consistently. So decide whether you're going to do a blog or whether you're going to do a podcast or whether you're going to do a vlog. So make that decision. And when you do that, set a launch date. Nothing says this goal or this business I want to launch is urgent like setting a date. When you set a launch date, there's something it does to your brain. Now you have a goal, you have a target that you're working towards to hit. So another thing I will recommend is downloading my business clarity blueprint. If you don't know what your minimum viable business should be, go to startthatbusinesspodcast.com and download my business clarity blueprint. There are tons of questions in that blueprint that will help you determine what your minimum viable business should look like, what legal registration you should go with, what services you should launch first. Once you answer those questions, you will get clarity and you will know exactly what you are going to start with first. The third step is to create a launch list for your minimum viable business. Now, once you have determined what your minimum viable business is going to look like, or what your minimum viable service is going to look like, then you want to create your launch list. What are the things you need to complete to launch your minimum viable business by the date that you set for yourself? So once you have created your launch list is simply you writing out all the things you need to complete to launch your minimum viable business by your launch date. Now, you see why it's important to focus on your minimum viable, because it reduces the scope of work that you need to do to just the things you need to launch your minimum viable business or your minimum viable service. That means you don't need to do all the things. When I decided that I was going to launch with the Audience First Path, I was able to focus on only the things I needed to do to launch my podcast. So I didn't have to start creating any service or anything extra. So that's why I was able to do it in 4 weeks, because I reduced my focus and my scope to just what I needed to do to launch my minimum viable business. The fourth step is to get one-time help to execute the items on your launch list. Remember, in step 3, we created the launch list. If this is your first service-based business, you might be overwhelmed when you write that list, and you might need to get a one-time help. That one-time help might be you hiring a VA for maybe 4 hours, a virtual assistant for 4 hours. It might be you hiring an implementation coach or an accountability coach for a limited amount of hours so that they can help you execute the items that you listed in your launch list. Now, if you need help to launch your minimum viable service-based business, go to startthatbusinesspodcast.com and book a coaching session with me so that I can help you execute the items or the activities or the task you have written down on your launch list. The fifth step is to get accountability. I cannot emphasize this enough. You can join a business community where there are other people like you who are trying to start a service-based business. You can hire an accountability coach who will keep you accountable every week on the items you have listed that you need to complete to be able to launch your minimum viable service-based business. You can hire an accountability coach. You can join a business community, but make sure you get some kind of accountability so that the date which you have set to launch your business, you can actually hit that date. You can actually finish all the activities you have listed, and you can launch your business on the launch date that you have selected. If you need an accountability coach, go to startthatbusinesspodcast.com and book a coaching session with me so that I can help you launch your service-based business. All right, let's recap real quick. 5 easy steps to launch your online service-based business without overwhelm. The first step is to choose a launch path that aligns with your current season. The second step is decide on your minimum viable business and set a launch date. The third step, create a launch list for your minimum viable business. The fourth step, get one-time help to execute your launch list. The fifth step, get accountability. In Matthew chapter 11, verse 30, Jesus says, "For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." When you sit to decide on the minimum viable business you want to start with first, or the minimum version of your online service-based business, you are making your yoke easy and you are making your burden light. And it will be easy for you to launch that business because you do not have to do all the things. So I pray that you will put everything you've heard in this podcast episode into practice, that you will take the yoke of Jesus, which is easy, and his burden, which is light, so that you can launch your online service-based business. I pray that you will keep things simple so that you can launch without overwhelm. I pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I hope you learned something new and you were encouraged to take action. If so, will you stop right now and share this episode with someone so they can get the help you just got? I would also love it if you can leave a review for this podcast on Apple Podcast or the podcast app you're using to listen. This is the number one way I know you're getting value from the content on this podcast. Until next time, always remember you have all you need to start that business. So keep listening for more episodes. I'll meet you here next week.